Welcome back to the deep dive. We are getting into something today that, well, it feels kind of mundane on the surface, but looking through the research stack you sent over, it is actually one of the most volatile, crazy, and just highly consequential elements in human
Oh,
history.
absolutely. It's totally wild once you get into it.
We are talking about copper, the red metal. And before we even start unpacking this history, because it really is madness, we have to be super clear right up front with you listening. Nothing we discuss today is financial advice.
Right. Zero. None.
We are strictly looking at history, at economics, human behavior. Please do not go buy copper futures or, leverage your house because of a chat you heard on this channel.
Exactly. This is purely for educational and entertainment purposes. We're exploring the mechanics of the market, trying to give you some amazing stories you can use to impress your friends at the pub. We are definitely not giving stock tips. Honestly, after you hear some of these tales, you might want to stay as far away from the commodities market as humanly possible. It is just not for the faint of heart.
It really isn't. The sources describe copper as the heartbeat of the global economy. And
Yeah.
I think for most of us, we just ignore it. It's not gold, right? It's not flashy. It's the plumbing in your basement. It's the wiring in the walls.
Yeah, it's invisible to most people.
Right. But the argument from the research is that if gold is the jewelry of the world, copper is the nervous system. If copper stops, the world literally stops.
That's a perfect way to frame it. I mean, if you look at the last 400 years, every single time civilization tries to make a massive leap forward, electrification, telecommunications, or now this whole green energy transition, copper is always the bottleneck. And because it's so critical, it attracts a very specific, almost crazy type of personality. The history of the copper market isn't just about rocks and mining, it's about massive hubris. It's about people trying to corner a force of nature and just getting entirely crushed by it.
And we have 5 specific strange tales from the research today that just illustrate this perfectly. We're going to look at currency crises, massive bank failures, billion-dollar frauds, but we want to trace the evolution of how people have tried and totally failed to control this metal.
Yeah. We're going to cover some complex economic theories here, things like Gresham's law, systemic risk, asymmetric information, but we're going to simplify them, make it pub talk. And we're going to view these stories through different lenses too. We've got the right-centric view, the left-centric view, and some really fascinating traditional Japanese perspectives that the sources brought up.
I love it. So let's just jump right in. The best place to start seems to be back when money literally was copper. We're going back to the 1600s.
17th century Sweden. This is just a phenomenal case study in what happens when a government tries to force a market reality that flat out does not exist. So at the time, Sweden controlled the Felon mine.
Huge mine, right?
Oh, massive. It was essentially the copper capital of the entire European world. So Sweden had this absolute abundance of copper, but they were really short on silver and gold.
And just basic supply and demand, right? If you have way too much of something, the price drops.
Exactly. But the Swedish crown did not want the price to drop. Copper exports were funding their empire, their wars. It was a huge part of the revenue. So they came up with this crazy scheme to artificially keep the price high. They decided to lock up the surplus copper by literally turning it into the national currency.
Wow.
Right? Because if the copper is circulating domestically as money, it's not flooding the export market. The problem, though, is the valuation. Copper is significantly less valuable by weight than silver. So to make a coin that had any real purchasing power,
It had to be huge.
it had to be massive.
Yeah, I read the notes on this. They called it plate money. And I'm thinking, okay, a heavy coin. But no, we are not talking about a coin in your pocket.
Yeah.
These were rectangular slabs weighing up to 43 pounds.
43 pounds for a single piece of currency. It sounds absurd to modern ears, but imagine you're a citizen back then, trying to buy a cow or to pay your taxes. You couldn't just carry a wallet. You literally needed a horse and a sled just to carry your cash.
That is insane. I mean, just the physical friction of doing business.
It was exhausting. And this brings us to a really core economic concept that the story perfectly illustrates, which is Gresham's law.
Right, Gresham's law. I remember this vaguely from Econ 101. It's the idea that bad money drives out good money. But how does that apply here? In this case, the copper is the bad money.
Yes, but bad in the sense of utility, not necessarily intrinsic value. The copper plates were just so cumbersome, heavy, annoying to use. The good money in this scenario was the silver currency, which was light, easy to carry, easy to hide. So Gresham's law dictates that if you have two currencies circulating with the same face value, people are going to spend the one they absolutely hate using and they'll hoard the one they like.
Oh, that makes total sense. You want to get rid of the 40-pound rock as fast as possible.
Exactly. So the Swedes inevitably hoarded all the silver under their floorboards and just frantically spent the heavy copper plates to get rid of them. The result was that silver completely vanished from circulation and the entire economy was left dragging these sleds around.
Now, what's really interesting is how the sources break this down politically. We're not taking sides here, just reporting what the arguments are. But there's a very right-centric view that actually defends these crazy copper plates.
Yeah, the hard money argument.
Right. The argument is that despite the massive inconvenience, this was sound money. It was fully backed by a physical commodity. You are holding the literal intrinsic value in your hands, completely unlike a paper note today, which is just a promise from a central bank. No inflation through money printing when the money weighs 40 pounds.
It's true, you can't really have fiat deception with a giant slab of metal. But then you look at the left-centric critique from the sources, which is also a really powerful argument. They point out that this system was essentially a regressive tax on the poor.
A physical burden.
A literal physical burden placed on the working class just to prop up the state's export profits. I mean, the wealthy elite weren't hauling these plates around the markets, the laborers were. It made basic survival and commerce physically exhausting for the exact people who could least afford the energy.
And there was also this fascinating Japanese perspective in the notes. It mentioned the concept of motenai. Can you simplify that for us?
Sure. So matane translates roughly to a deep sense of regret concerning waste. In the traditional Japanese approach, specifically if you look at their zeni copper coins from history, they were small, round, very efficient, and they had a hole in the middle so you could string them together.
Oh, right. You see those in museums.
Oh, right. You see those in museums.
Yeah. That design respected the user. The Swedish system completely lacked that respect. From the Japanese cultural viewpoint, the Swedish plates lacked kansha, which means gratitude towards the user. It was just a wasteful, arrogant design that totally ignored the human element of the economy. That is such a great way to look at it. And it's a perfect transition, too, because as we move from the 1600s into the 20th century, the weight of copper changes. It stops being about the literal physical weight of the metal on a sled, and it starts being about the financial weight of the contracts.
Oh, yeah. Things get very modern very fast.
We're moving to 1907. F. Augustus Heinz, the Copper King.
Heinz is such a wild, pivotal figure. He wasn't just a miner who struck it rich. He was a financial engineer. Or, honestly, more accurately, he was just a massive gambler. And by 1907, he decides he is going to entirely corner the market on a stock of United Copper.
Okay, this is where we need to get a bit technical, but let's keep it simple. The strategy he tried to use is called the short squeeze. Now, a lot of people listening probably remember this from the GameStop crazy a few years ago, but the mechanics back in 1907 were a little different. How was Heinz actually trying to pull this off?
Right. So Heinz believed that a bunch of Wall Street speculators were shorting his company. And for anyone who doesn't know, when you short a stock, you're betting the price will go down. You borrow the stock, sell it at today's price, and promise to buy it back later, hopefully cheaper, to return it.
And you pocket the difference.
Exactly. So Heinz's master plan was to secretly buy up all the available shares of United Copper himself. If he owned all the shares, then when those short sellers eventually had to buy the stock back to close their positions,
They'd have to buy from him.
boom, they would have no choice. He could literally name his price. He would squeeze them until they broke.
It's incredibly aggressive strategy. I mean, if it works, you become infinitely rich. You own the market. But if it fails?
If it fails, you don't just lose your own money, you can break the entire financial system. And Heinz failed, epically. His brother was actually executing some of the trades for him, and the brother entirely miscalculated the market depth. He misread how many shares were out there. So the short sellers didn't panic. They found shares. And the price of United Copper just violently collapsed instead of skyrocketing.
Now, if this was just one rich guy losing his shirt on a bad bet, it would be a footnote. Who cares, right? But this introduces our next big economic concept from the sources: systemic risk.
This is crucial. Heinz didn't just operate in a vacuum. He was deeply connected to the banking system. He was actually the president of the Mercantile National Bank.
Oh, wow. So he's trading with bank leverage.
Basically, yeah. So when the copper scheme collapsed, the public depositors found out and they panicked. They assumed his bank was insolvent, so they rushed the bank to withdraw their money. And that panic didn't stop there. It spread like a virus to other banks and trust companies that were associated with Heinz's network. Massive contagion. It triggered what we now call the Panic of 1907, which was one of the absolute worst financial crises in American history. The stock market fell 50%.
50%. That's unbelievable. It's incredible to draw the straight line here. A failed attempt to corner a copper stock literally shut down the U.S. banking system.
And here is the absolute kicker. The detail every listener needs to take away to the pub. The chaos caused by this one copper speculator was so terrifying to the U.S. government that they realized they could not rely on private bankers anymore. Back then, J.P. Morgan himself had to step in and bail out the system. The government realized that was insane. So this specific copper crisis directly motivated the Aldrich-Vreeland Act, which eventually gave birth to the Federal Reserve.
Wait, so the Fed, literally the most powerful central banking institution on Earth, exists in large part because a guy named Heinz made a bad bet on copper.
It is the ultimate butterfly effect, or, the copper effect. A single greedy commodity trade ended up restructuring the entire global financial order.
That is phenomenally crazy. All right, let's jump forward again. We've seen physical hoarding in Sweden. We've seen stock manipulation in New York. Now we get to the 1990s, and we meet a completely different kind of beast, the rogue trader.
Oh, Mr. Copper, Yasuo Hamanaka.
Yeah, so Hamanaka, this is tale number 3.
Hamanaka is a legend in the commodities world, though definitely for the wrong reasons. He worked for the Sumitomo Corporation, which is this massive, highly prestigious 300-year-old trading house in Japan. And for about a decade, this single guy controlled roughly 5% of the entire world's copper supply.
Now, to a layperson, 5% might not sound like a monopoly.
Oh, in a global physical commodity market, 5% is massive. It's enough to easily move global prices. He was the absolute whale of the market. But the crazy part of the story isn't about his trading success. It's about the illusion of his success. In 1996, the bomb drops. It's revealed that Hamanaka had been hiding massive, unbelievable losses.
$2.6 billion worth of losses, right?
$2.6 billion.
How does one guy hide $2.6 billion? That's the GDP of a small country. How is that even possible in a modern corporation?
This is where we get into the concept of asymmetric information. So Hamanaka was the head of the trading division. He controlled the buying and selling, sure, but he also had significant control over the back office reporting. He had way more information than his bosses or the auditors. So he maintained the secret ledger of unauthorized trades. He would literally sell copper to fictional names or use off-balance sheet accounts to park his losses so nobody could see them.
He was basically running a Ponzi scheme inside his own employer.
Exactly. Using profits from new trades to cover the massive holes from his old losses, just praying the market would eventually turn in his favor and he could make it all back before anyone noticed.
And the sources really dig into the cultural fallout of this, not just the money, but looking at it through the lens of Japanese corporate values.
It was devastating. You really have to understand the concepts of meio, which is honor, and wa, which is harmony, in Japanese business culture. The individual is supposed to subordinate themselves to work for the collective good of the corporation. So Hamanaka, acting as a lone wolf, doing this all in secret, it was viewed as a profound betrayal. It wasn't just financial fraud, it was a total destruction of social harmony. He brought deep shame to a historic institution.
But there was a contra view in the research packet that I thought was super provocative. Some people in the market actually argue that Hamanaka wasn't just a pure crook, but maybe a scapegoat.
Yeah, the rogue genius theory.
Right.
The argument here, and it's a controversial one, is that Sumitomo management likely knew he was super aggressive. And as long as he was making them millions, they were more than happy to look the other way. It's only when the market turned and the losses became undeniable that they suddenly clutched their pearls and branded him a rogue trader.
Ah, I see.
And that contra view suggests that if he had just been left alone, given more time, not forced by auditors to unwind his positions at the worst possible moment, he might have traded his way out of it.
That is a very dangerous way to think.
Oh, extremely dangerous. But in the high-stakes, hyper-competitive world of commodities, the line between a visionary genius and a criminal is very often just the final profit and loss statement.
It's all about the result. If you win, you're a genius. If you lose, you go to jail.
Pretty much.
Okay, moving to our fourth tale. We're getting into the modern era of incredibly sophisticated, almost mind-bending fraud. This is the Qingdao port scandal in China around 2014. And this one isn't about hiding losses like Hamanaka. This is about literally inventing assets out of thin air.
The ghost copper story. This one is wild. So to understand this, we have to quickly explain how commodity financing works for the listeners. If you are a company in China and you have a giant warehouse full of physical copper ingots, that is a highly valuable asset.
Right.
You can go to a bank, show them the official warehouse receipt, which is the piece of paper that proves you own the metal, and use that copper as collateral to get a massive cash loan.
Simple enough. It's exactly like a mortgage. The house is the collateral. If you don't pay, the bank takes the house. If you don't pay the loan, the bank takes the copper.
Exactly. But imagine if you took the deed to your house, photocopied it, and went to Bank A to get a mortgage. Then you walked across the street to Bank B, showed them the photocopy, and got a second mortgage. Then Bank C and Bank D. You only have one house, but you've secured 4 huge mortgages.
And that is exactly what happened at Qingdao Port.
On an absolute industrial scale. This introduces our next term, rehypothecation. Now, in legitimate high finance, rehypothecation allows assets to be reused as collateral in very specific, heavily regulated ways. But in Qingdao, it was just straight up illegal theft. These trading companies were issuing multiple duplicate warehouse receipts for the exact same physical pile of copper.
Just copying the receipts and handing them out to different Western and Chinese banks.
Yeah.
So what happens when the credit conditions eventually tighten up and the banks all come to collect their collateral?
The music completely stops. You had multiple different banks literally showing up at the port with their trucks, all holding official receipts for the exact same specific stack of metal. And they suddenly realized the copper had been promised to 3, 4, sometimes 5 different creditors simultaneously.
So billions of dollars in loans were backed by absolutely nothing. Air.
Ghost metal. It vanished. And it really exposed the sheer fragility of the trust but verify model in global finance. Because if you aren't physically walking into that warehouse, auditing the paper trail and touching metal yourself, you are insanely vulnerable.
And the notes also pointed out a huge macroeconomic implication here, too. This completely punctured the narrative of the insatiable Chinese demand for copper at the time.
Oh yeah, totally. Everyone thought China was buying all this copper because their growth was unstoppable, building new cities, new grids. But it turned out a massive portion of that demand wasn't for construction at all. It was just metal sitting static in warehouses, being used purely as a financial tool to scam banks for cheap capital. The China growth story had these massive copper-plated holes in it.
It's just phenomenal to think about. Okay, so we've covered physical government manipulation, stock market corners, rogue solitary trading, and massive collateral fraud. It paints a pretty dark picture of the market. But our final story, tale number 5, is a bit different. It's actually about the metal itself acting as a source of truth. We're talking about Dr. Copper.
I absolutely love this persona. The market calls it Dr. Copper because it is literally the only metal with a PhD in economics.
Now, why on earth has Wall Street anthropomorphized a lump of red metal?
Because copper is the ultimate leading indicator. Think about everything copper is used for. Housing pipes, electrical wiring, cars, factories, microchips, the servers running the internet. You cannot build anything in a modern economy without it, period. Therefore, months before a construction company breaks ground on a new subdivision, they have to order the copper. Before a car factory ramps up EV production, they order the copper.
Oh, I see. So the buying happens before the actual economic activity shows up in the official data.
Precisely. So if the price of copper starts rising steadily, it is a very reliable signal that the real economy is gearing up for growth.
And conversely, if the price of copper suddenly tanks.
It means the factory orders are drying up. It signals a recession is coming months before the GDP data or the unemployment numbers actually show it. Government data looks backward at what already happened. Dr. Copper looks forward at what's about to happen.
There was some really cool historical trivia in the notes, too, about the strategic, real-world importance of this, specifically regarding the Statue of Liberty in World War II.
Yeah, this visualizes the value so perfectly. The Statue of Liberty is made of copper, about 62,000 pounds of it. Now, she's green today because of oxidation, which is just a chemical reaction that creates a patina to protect the metal. But underneath, she is still that highly conductive, vital red metal. And during World War II, copper was so utterly essential for the war effort.
Because of shell casings and wiring for planes and radios.
Exactly. It was so critical for victory that the U.S. government actually completely stopped minting copper pennies in 1943. They needed every scrap of it for the military, so they switched to making pennies out of steel for a year.
Wow. And that brings up a really deep philosophical point that was in the conclusion of the source material, the
Yeah.
difference between gold and copper.
Yes, the distinction between vanity and victory. I love that framing. Look, gold is for preserving wealth. It's for making jewelry or sitting completely useless in a dark bank vault. Gold is essentially a fear asset.
Right, you buy it when you're scared.
Exactly. But copper is an action asset. It is for winning wars, building modern cities, electrifying entire nations. In a true existential crisis, you can't shoot gold at the enemy. And you can't wire a global radar system with it. You desperately need the red metal.
That is such a powerful way to look at it. Okay, so we've been all the way down the rabbit hole today. We've seen the 40-pound Swedish sled money, the banking panic of 1907, the Sumitomo billions hidden by one guy, the ghost metal of Qingdao port, and the diagnostic superpower of Dr. Copper. If we had to distill this entire chat down for you listening, whether you're an economic policymaker, an investor, or just someone who wants to sound smart at the pub, what are the 5 key takeaways?
I think there are very distinct lessons from every single era we covered. Let's start with Sweden and the dollar. The lesson there is about the absolute limits of government intervention. You cannot force a market to accept a currency that is physically or practically broken. People aren't stupid. Gresham's law takes over, and the market will always find a workaround to reject bad money.
And from Heinz in 1907.
We learn about systemic risk. We are all deeply connected. A single arrogant gambler in the copper pit can literally bring down your local savings account. It highlights exactly why regulations and institutions like the Federal Reserve almost always emerge from the ashes of these commodity bubbles.
What about Sumitomo?
The immense danger of the star culture in finance. Asymmetric information is a weapon. If one person holds all the keys to the kingdom and starts generating results that look way too good to be true, they probably are. It's a brutal lesson in the necessity of internal oversight.
And the Qingdao port fraud.
Physical verification. The entire financial world is built on paper promises and digital receipts. But at the end of the day, there has to be a physical, tangible asset backing it up. With rehypothecation, if you don't aggressively audit the actual collateral, if you can't touch it, you don't own it. You're just gambling on a photocopy.
And finally, from Dr. Copper himself.
Listen to the signal. Ignore the daily noise of the stock market pundits and just watch the raw materials. If copper is sick, the broader economy is catching a cold. It is genuinely the most honest voice in the room.
It really does change how you look at something as simple as a penny or just the wire running to your router. It's not just a material. It's this continuous record of human ambition, greed, and failure.
Absolutely. It's dirty, it's incredibly heavy, it turns green when you leave it outside, but it literally makes the modern world possible. And as we've seen throughout all these stories, it demands respect. If you try to corner it, fake it, or hoard it, it almost always fights back and destroys you.
That seems like the absolute perfect place to wrap up this deep dive, leave you with a healthy respect for the red metal. Actually, before we go, I was just thinking about the future. If copper is this vital, and we are pushing into space exploration, building colonies on Mars or whatever, whoever controls the copper on asteroids is going to be the next Augustus Heinz.
Yeah. Oh, without a doubt. The space race is going to be a resource race. And the first trillionaire will probably be an asteroid copper miner. The madness is just going to move off planet.
Wow. Think about that next time you look up at the stars. Well, thank you for walking us through this incredible history today.
A pleasure. Always fun to dig into it.
And to everyone listening, we really hope you enjoyed these tales. Remember, take this to the pub, impress your friends. If you like this chat, please do us a huge favor, subscribe, and like this channel. Share it with someone who thinks economics is just boring math. It's not. It's wild human drama. We will be back soon with another deep dive.
See you next time.